सिद्धार्थ जी, जब आपके बारे में नरीन सर बता रहे थे, he got really really emotional for the fact कि लंदन देखा, पेरिस देखा, लेकिन दिल फिर भी हिंदुस्तानी. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, I didn't know that I will feel this way when I left India in 2005. So it's been 15 years that I've not lived in India. And I know if my parents listen to this, they'll be very surprised. But because when I left, I was very certain I'm not coming back to India. I think they've been wanting me to come back or stay closer to India for a very long time. And I was just not willing to listen. But then I got married. So I lost all decision-making powers.
That's a story for all men, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like my parents had plotted this, like iski shadi karwa dete, and then they, they made sure that the girl I got married to wanted to come back. But jokes apart, I think over the last 5 years, I have come to the realization that I need to be closer to my family, and that's one of the reasons why we moved to Singapore. Um, and the other reason, or the bigger reason, is we were just suffering from a midlife crisis, a professional and a personal midlife crisis. That's what I joke about.
Hey, Siddharth, good to have you.
Great to be here. Yeah, thanks, Naren. I really appreciate this. It's wonderful to be here.
Do we call you Sid or do we call you Siddharth?
Either one works. Yeah, a rose is just as sweet.
Okay, beautiful. Then I'll call you Siddharth.
All right.
Uh, uh, Friends, I had two conversations with Siddharth across the last about 10 days. And it was like I am talking to a friend. There is an adage which I very deeply believe in, that there are no strangers in the world, only friends you haven't met yet. And speaking with Siddharth made me believe in that adage even more. We opened up, we spoke about life, he very openly shared about his journey, the reasons for him to take some major decisions in life. And I'm also blessed to know his very, very dear sister, which is how this relationship and this connection happened. Uh, Siddharth is a guy who knows how to take the necessary risks. He's a guy who likes to excel in what he does. He's a guy who wants to do things which are significant and not run behind things which are maybe more money, more fame, but not significant enough. He's also a person who wants to balance different aspects of life. He doesn't want to live his life in one direction, and that is work. He balances it beautifully with his role in family. And he also is a globetrotter. He loves to travel all over. So, with that, let me welcome Siddharth to our High Performance Youth Summit. Siddharth, once again, officially, it's beautifully to have you here.
Thanks, Naren. It's great to be here as well.
Siddharth, can you share with us a few life experiences which has shaped your journey through life?
Sure. I think, I feel like my life has, if I think about, if I was to write a book, what chapters would my life have? I think chapter one, like Naren said, he knows my sister very well. He coaches my sister. He's my sister's life coach. My sister's 6 years older than me. And when I was younger, I think chapter one was, I just wanted to do everything my sister was doing. If she was, I actually copied her handwriting. My handwriting is exactly like hers, although it's better now, or at least I like to believe so. She learned German. I remember when she was in high school, and I wanted to learn German. I had no idea what that meant, and I did. I think it stopped around about then because she went on to become a chartered accountant, and I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been a terrible chartered accountant. Um, I think a second kind of chapter of my life was after my 10th standard when I went to college. I studied in Ferguson College in Pune, and I felt like, my personality really developed during those times. Um, I uh, I think I made friends back then that I'm still friends with. So more than 30 years. And my priorities in life changed. I was academically a very strong person throughout my schooling. I was usually first or second top performing student. And I went to junior college, and I didn't think that was important. And my parents were very disappointed. I didn't even try to get into IIT. Never gave my JEE. They were very disappointed because I just thought there's more to life than academics. Um, at the time, they thought I was distracted because I had a very active social life. I think anyone who's in their 20s, when I say I had a very active social life, probably understands what I mean. And so that was kind of chapter two when I thought academics was not a priority, and that's not necessarily an advice I will give anyone. And I didn't do badly. I still did well. I was still topping my college or thereabouts, in the top few. Um, I think chapter three is when I feel like I came of age when I went to the US to do my masters, and someone who generally topped school. I flunked the first semester, the first course I took. I flunked, like I bombed. I got like an F grade or something like that, and I had to redo that course. I had to do it all over again. I had to take that same course again. Um, I feel like these were like the most important chapters of my life. I think after that I started working, and then of course that's probably a different book altogether.
So, Siddharth, you have lived life, let's say, a little more complete than most of us would do. Um, how important or what is the role of luck in life?
It's a great question. For a long time, anytime I felt like मुझे जो चाहिए वो मुझे मिला नहीं, I would say यार lucky खराब था. I used to do that. But I think, I'm 38 now, and I feel like I truly believe. I know it sounds very pedantic. Like it's not like I'm trying to ये मुहावरे जैसे नहीं बोल रहा हूँ मैं. I truly think you make your own luck, and making your own luck is equivalent to going and opening doors. And I wish someone had given me this advice when I was in my 20s, because everything you do as an adult, especially when you start, your professional career, everything you're doing is basically you're opening doors. You're trying to knock on doors. You're trying to open as many as you can. And creating your luck is directly proportional to opening as many doors as possible, because at some point of time, one of those doors will take you to something bigger, better than you had ever expected. And so the more doors you knock on, the more doors will open. And the more doors you walk through, the higher the probability that something bigger, better than you would ever imagined or expected is going to come your way. And I think life is a great, um, has a great way of averaging things out. There are times when you move slower than you expect. There are times when you move faster than you expect. And I think over a period of time, it averages out. So I've always thought of making my own luck in terms of going and opening doors. Although when I was younger, और जब मैं ये दरवाजे खटखटा रहा था, I don't think I knew that I'm trying to create my luck. I think it was just how I was brought up, just how I was raised by my parents, that I wanted to be the best at anything I do. To the point when I was in school, I thought I want to win a singing contest. I was terrible at singing, but I would still go and embarrass myself in front of 1,000 kids, because I just wanted to be the best at everything. And then as I grew older, I realized that you can't do it all, and so I started picking my battles a little more wisely. Although my wife thinks I'm still not doing it well enough, but um, but I think creating your luck is going and opening doors. And I wish when I was in my early 20s, someone had told me that even in your professional life, what you should focus on is going and knocking on as many doors as possible, because every job you have is effectively training you for your next job. I did not think about my career that way until very recently, and one of the biggest learning lessons of my professional career has been not having thought that way.
Oh, uh, Siddharth, tell us the interesting story on how did you get into Microsoft?
Um, yeah, this is a funny story. So I was studying in the US at the University of Michigan, which is in Ann Arbor. It's a very big university, and so it's a university. I'll tell you something funny about the University of Michigan. It's a very large campus. Basically, the entire town, the entire city is the university. So it's called a university town. And I'll answer your question, but I think this is a really interesting fact is there's an unspoken rule that every lecture starts 10 minutes after the designated time. So if you have a lecture at 10 o'clock, actually starts at 10 past 10. It's an unwritten rule. That's because they have to allocate at least 10 minutes for people to campus to another, whether you're on foot or on take a bus or whatever. So I was studying for my master's, and I had flunked a course in my first semester. अगर कोई engineering का student है in the audience, then the course was stochastics and random processes. Very boring subject. I have no idea. At that time, I thought I'm interested in it. I got wiser a little later, but I flunked that course, and the next semester was a career fair. Career fair is basically campus recruitment, what we call campus recruitment in India, but it happens in a slightly different way, where employers come, set up booths, and then you go to each booth, you talk to someone, and you drop in your resume. So I printed about 50 resumes. I made my resume, I printed 50 copies, and I was not a computer science student. I was an electronics and telecom engineer, and I was not studying computer science. So I was not interested in software. I did not like writing any code, never really written much code in my life. And so Microsoft was not on my radar. There was a map given to us, which company's booth is where. I made my shortlist. I planned out my route. A lot of people had told me it gets very crowded. So I was very smart about starting from the opposite corner from where the main entrance is and then walking my way backwards. So I had this whole plan for the day, and I went through the whole day. And right at the end, I think most of the booths were starting to wrap up their booths. They were closing everything. And right towards the door, when I was exiting, I realized I have one physical paper copy of my resume left. And the Microsoft booth was right there towards the door. So I was like, why waste this paper? Some tree has sacrificed itself to print this. So I'll go and drop in my resume, not expecting anything. And I was not interested, to be honest. If there had been a queue at that time at the booth, I would not have gone. वहाँ पे कोई queue नहीं था. So I thought I'll go. And I struck a conversation with one of the employees from Microsoft who was, managing the booth, only because that person was from Germany and spoke German, and my resume listed languages as German. And I was very fond of German when I was in school. I was just fascinated. At one time, I wanted to major in German. Thankfully, my parents had better sense and prevailed. So the conversation we had, the connection we had, was nothing to do with my studies, had nothing to do with technical skills. We just had a great connection. And the next day, I was asked to come for an interview. I didn't even know there is a job called product manager, where I don't have to write any code. I have to mostly talk and convince people and come up with ideas, and only answer the question, why should we build and what should we build? And I don't have to worry too much about how it gets built. I didn't even know there's a job like that. It sounded like the perfect job. My wife jokes about how, Sid was meant to be a product manager because he only knows how to give orders. So that's how I ended up at Microsoft. I got a call the next day. I think in a couple of weeks they flew me into Seattle from Michigan. I had on-site interviews and they offered me an internship. And by the end of my internship, on the last day of my internship, they offered me a full-time job, and I ended up spending 12 and a half years there.
Wow. Wow. So every job or job offer you had seems to have some interesting story behind it. Uh,
Yes.
Grab was also very funny, no? How you grabbed it.
Yeah. So 12 years at Microsoft in the US. Or like I said earlier, we were going through a midlife crisis. We thought, we need to be closer to our families. We were maybe a little bored of being in Seattle. And so I had some very attractive, lucrative job offers in Seattle. But I chose against doing it. I think, Naren mentioned a little earlier, my kids were at the time 1 and 4 years old. And we thought if we want to experience a different life, now's the time to do it because I can, reset their lives. They won't know the difference. They're too young. They'll adjust. It'll be harder for me to do that once they're older because then they'll have their friends. They'll have activities. They'll have responsibilities. पूरी जिंदगी का सबसे खराब इंटरव्यू था शायद. And I knew that it was not going to work out. I didn't like the interviewing style. I don't think I gave particularly impressive answers either. And I was convinced this is not the place for me. So we had left it. We'd forgotten about it. The recruiter called me after 2 weeks, said, Sid, this doesn't look like a good fit. She was very polite. She didn't say you did badly. She said, you are too senior for us and we can't afford you. I said, fine, we didn't even discuss any numbers, but I read between the lines. Then my next visit to Singapore, I again messaged the chief product officer at Grab, who's a very dear friend of mine now. And I said, why don't we get coffee? And so this was after they'd rejected me. I went and had coffee with him. We had half an hour. I think at the 15-minute mark, he said, that's it. I want you to go meet Anthony or Huling, who are the founders of Grab. I want you to meet them tomorrow. Do you have time? And I said, I am working till 6 o'clock. My flight is at 9 o'clock. So maybe I have half an hour. And he was like, no, don't worry. You have 2 hours because in Singapore, you can manage getting to the airport 20 minutes before your flight. You'll be fine, which is true. It's a blessing. So I spent some time with the founders of Grab the next day, and that's how I ended up getting a job at Grab after being outrightly rejected.
You excelled in the studies in India, and then you flunked in US, is what you said.
Yeah.
So, what was the gap? I mean, once intelligent, always intelligent. So, किधर गड़बड़ हो गया?
I don't think once intelligent, always intelligent doesn't always happen. Certainly not in my case. Clearly, as data proves. I think growing up in India, and I wish someone had, again, this is probably a second piece of advice I wish someone had given me. And to be honest, my father did give it to me. I just did not listen to him. So maybe the advice I should have been given when I was in 20s is listen to your father and listen to your mother, because my parents have been telling me this forever. I think the Indian education system, while it's very successful, by the way, a lot of ex-Indian alumni, is leading the Microsofts and the Googles and the Adobes of the world. But the Indian education system does not train discipline and does not really make you structured. You kind of get away with studying for the last 5 days or 6 days before the exam and still be able to ace your exams. I think I top performed in India, and I never studied for more than 10 days before the exam. And before the final exams, by the way. I probably did not even attend college to be giving any practicals or any intermediate exams. Not advice I would ever give to anyone. I wish someone had told me this back then. I was always a defaulter. My parents would get called every single semester when I was in college. And I'll tell you a funny story, by the way. Once, one of my head of departments in engineering college in India called me up to his office. Hauled me, actually. He did not call me, hauled me into his office and said that, क्या आप, Marathi he spoke, आप college नहीं attend करते हो, what is wrong? क्या हो रहा है? I said, sorry, sir, I know I don't attend, I'm sorry. I didn't give him any explanation. He said, who's your father? Let me call him, give me his number. So I said, okay, here's the number. And he called my father and he said, आपका बच्चा college नहीं आता है. So my father said to him, I know, like मुझे भी पता है college नहीं जाता है, आप कुछ करो please, हमारी तो सुनता नहीं है, can you please do something about it? And so he just kind of threw it back at the professor, and the professor was thinking, maybe his parents don't know and he'll be in trouble. But my father basically put it back on him, and my father said to him, आपको जो punishment देना है दो आप, you handle it, don't bother me. And my father hung up on him. So it was really funny. And since then, this was my first year of engineering. After that, they didn't bother calling my parents. So I think the big difference is, you can get away with studying at the last minute and you can still do well. When I moved to the US, this whole concept of grading, where your grade is a score which is weighted and divided between your attendance, your participation in class, your homework scores, punctuality of giving your homeworks on time, and your mid-semester exams and your final exams. Like, this concept was far too complicated for me. And it took me, and that's why I said, once intelligent doesn't mean always intelligent, because it took me an entire semester to understand this. I was slow. I was not prepared for this much amount of systematic, structured, religious studying. I was still trying to do the same thing. Last 5 days I'll study and I'll try and get a passing score, which I didn't manage to. And I was blessed. I had students in my class from all over the world, and there were students who managed their entire day on Outlook, on the calendar. It was just mind blowing. I never thought at the age of 21 or 22, someone can organize and have like breakfast, meeting with friends, social time, studying time, homework time, everything organized and marked out on an Outlook calendar. And I'm talking about 2004, 2005. I mean, that just blew me away. And I started doing that in 2005. And, even now, like, I actually have even sleep time logged onto my calendar. And that's also because now I work for an Indian company and there's a time difference. I'm in Singapore, but it just taught me a big lesson in being organized.
What would you call the biggest obstacle you've overcome in life?
My parents will have a hearty laugh. I don't know if they managed to attend or not. They were very interested in attending. I think the biggest obstacle in my life, which I've still not really accomplished, is being able to cut roti with one hand. I'm like one of those people who eat roti like that. Jokes aside, I think the biggest obstacle in my life has been complacency and comfort. 12 years at Microsoft, look, I did very well. I'm very thankful to Microsoft. I'm not trying to be a prick, but I overstayed my time at Microsoft. And again, I think my father has probably reminded me about this 20 times. My wife has been telling me, that's it. I think you're getting very complacent and comfortable. Because, I knew how to be successful in that company. I loved what I was doing, and I didn't even want to find out what else happens. And so I was almost not following my own advice of going and knocking on doors and opening it anymore, because it got very comfortable. And I think, one of the luxuries of working at Microsoft is when I had my daughter, I had 3 months of paternity leave. And I had to take it before she turned 1. So when she was 9 months old, I took my 3 months off. And that's when I really was able to get out of the bubble and think about my life in a different way. And that's when I made up my mind that I have gotten complacent and comfortable. And getting out of it was hard. I completely reset my career. I spent 12 years doing enterprise products. I spent 12 years doing platforms, never done anything in the consumer world. And then suddenly landed a fairly senior job at Grab where all of my peers were ex Ola, ex Yahoo, ex and so on. So they knew what they were doing. And for the first 2 months, I had no idea what I was doing. In fact, at the end of 1 month at Grab, I remember telling my wife, I think I've made a big mistake and I don't think I'm cut out for this. I almost didn't believe in myself. So I think that was probably the biggest obstacle. It's complacency, and it's very easy to fall in that trap. And it's very difficult for yourself to recognize you're getting complacent. It has to come from someone external, someone near and dear to you.
That's a very deep insight. Very difficult to realize it yourself. It needs somebody from outside to remind you of that.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. What would you say is the biggest achievement of your life?
I think it's this. Father no, it is. Like anyone who's young, I wish I had known this. Being a father or being a parent is an incredibly challenging job. I have two young kids. They're 3 years and 6 years old now, and they're incredibly funny. They're witty. They're happy kids. They make me laugh. They are laughing most of the time. And I don't know what is it that we as parents did right or wrong, but they're really funny and witty and full of life. And I genuinely think, I know it sounds very pedantic, but I really think my biggest achievement is having these incredibly full of life kids that are full of life, and they're doing very well. That's good.
Yeah. How do you balance life, Siddharth?
I won't say I'm successful at doing that. It's a daily struggle. It is probably the one thing I would say I'm still failing at, and I would not I'd give myself a C or something. It's hard. It's hard, especially when you have the kind of job that I have, which I love. I absolutely love it. I never feel like I'm working hard, although I work long hours. Most of the times, especially the time difference, working for an Indian company now, half of my team is in India, half of it is in China. I go to bed at 11, 12. I'm on the computer all the way till 9:30, 10 minimum, usually till 12. So it's hard. I think the one thing I've started doing and that has somewhat helped is I've blocked out my calendars during kids' sleeping time, which is between 7 and 8 p.m. My time. And so if I block an hour, then I'm usually able to extract at least 45 minutes. I read them a book before their sleep time. I drop them to school in the mornings now. The good thing is my mornings have opened up because I'm ahead of India. And so I go on my bicycle. My son is on his bicycle. My daughter is sitting behind me on this baby carrier. And so I feel like there are these small moments that help you balance it out. And no matter how stressful the prior night was, I must have gone to bed at 12:30 or 1 o'clock. My wife has forced me out of bed to go drop the kids because I don't feel like getting out. But that 15-minute or 10-minute bicycle ride to go and drop them to school actually sets me up for the day. I think that's one. And the second one is, in these COVID times, we can't do it, but we travel extensively. I think that's our biggest stress buster. And my kids travel really well. We started them young. My son is 6, and I think he has more stamps in his passport than I had when I was 25. My daughter is 3 years old, and she's been to at least 10 countries. So we do take time off, like you mentioned earlier, Naren. And I think that's our happiest times and our biggest stress busters are when we travel as a family.
You mentioned in our conversation, हमारी बात जब चल रही थी, तो I remember you saying, I found that my job at Microsoft is consciously and subconsciously taking my time away from children. तो
Yeah.
उसके बारे में कुछ बताओगे?
Yeah, the question Naren asked me was, why did you move from the US to Singapore and leave, what was arguably maybe a more comfortable life from a material standpoint? Although Singapore is also very comfortable, by the way, as we have now found out. I think that the reason why we did it was, and what I joke about, although it's true, is a midlife crisis, is I spent 12 years plus at Microsoft. My wife had spent 9 years plus at Amazon. And after we had kids, after we had my daughter, we realized that if you're spending a good, 10, 11 hours, either in office or thinking about office, away from our kids, then it better be worth it. And it better amount to something substantial that, we feel like the trade-off is worth it and the sacrifice is worth it. And we felt like, Microsoft and Amazon, huge companies, we're grateful we got the opportunities we did. I'm not trying to sound ungrateful. But it just felt like we were, kind of relatively small cogs in a giant machine. And the trade-off or the balance between why are we spending time away from kids, while we're in office or even when you come back, you're still thinking about work somewhere in your head. Is it worth it? And we started feeling like maybe it's not. And that's one of the biggest reasons we thought we'll move closer to family, and we'll kind of reset and switch our lives, fairly well settled lives, and we just completely reset those. And we're glad we did. I think the best decision I've ever taken in my life.
So somebody is asking this question: what made you choose Grab?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll answer that with something I read today morning, by the way, and I think it's either comes from APJ Abdul Kalam, the late APJ Abdul Kalam, or maybe comes from Narayan Murthy, because I saw this phrase attributed to both of them. It said that love your job. Don't confuse your love for your job with love for the organization you work with. It was something along those lines. And it said next to after that, your organization may not love you anymore. Macroeconomic conditions, you can get laid off. It's happening right now in many parts of the world. So love your job, not the organization. So I'll start with that. The reason I say that is, I think the biggest reason I joined Grab was, number one, was the person I was going to go work for, who was going to be my manager. Great guy. His name is Gerald Singh. So I think that's reason number one. I think reason number two is it was impacting people's lives in a way where I could see it. I built Windows Enterprise. It became a double-digit billion-dollar revenue business, huge profit margins, 90% plus profit margins. It's unlike any business I've ever seen. But was I really able to connect how somebody's life got better or how somebody's life was impacted by having built or by having, ran the Windows Enterprise business? I don't think so. Very difficult. But the more stories I read about Grab, there were people who could not make their ends meet, their life's ends meet. People who couldn't afford basic food. And the gig economy in general, whether it's Ola or Swiggy or Grab, it's made their lives come to a point where they are able to send their kids to like, really, really good schools, like private schooling that they couldn't afford. Not just like putting food on the table. And so entire, generation of people whose lives have been impacted in such a big way. At that time, it really connected with us, and both me and my wife felt like we need to be a part of something like this, where I can point a finger to how what we are spending 10, 11, 12 hours in a day doing is affecting and impacting lives, and for in a constructive, positive way. So I think that was the second biggest reason. Again, it sounds very pedantic, but we really emotionally connected with a cause. And a lot of people who work at Grab actually don't do it because they get, a big fat paycheck at the end. They work at Grab because they really believe that it's a vehicle of social change.
Wow. So what is your idea of taking risks? What are your take on risks when youth, mid-age, old age? Your thoughts on risk?
Yeah, I think I saw this great series, Indian series, which I assume a lot of you may have seen, called 1992, The Scam, which is based on Harshad Mehta's life. And a very famous dialogue in that series, which starts with something like "risk nahi to kuch bhi nahi," or something like that. I can't remember the words.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe someone can type in the chat what the dialogue was. It's a really nice dialogue. I'm sorry I can't recollect it. Um, I, I think I wish when I was younger, someone had given me this advice on take as many risks as possible when you're younger, because naturally your appetite for taking risks is going to plateau or is going to diminish as you grow older because you have more responsibilities. You have kids, like I said earlier. I could shuttle my 4-year-old and 1-year-old across the continent, and they know no better. In fact, my daughter doesn't even remember the US. My son does a little bit. But they're very happy. They love it, and they would love it no matter where I go. But I wish I had taken some more risks when I was younger. I overstayed my career at Microsoft because I was not willing to take the risk. I was very happy, complacent, comfortable in my bubble. I wish I had traveled more when I was younger. I'm so glad I'm married to who I am because she shares my love for travel and doesn't mind hurtling, like two little kids and managing them on like 20-hour flights or 24 hours in flight. Because it's hard. But I wish I traveled more when I was younger. Um, Someone asked me recently, what's the best investment you've made? Or what's the best thing you've spent your money and time on? And I told the person, I think the best money and time I've spent is on travel because travel is the only thing that you buy and it still makes you richer. Like you spend on it, but it makes you richer. So maybe I should have taken a few more risks when I was younger. I could afford it, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be Iceland. Like one of my favorite places to travel to is actually this little town near Pune called Khadakwasla.
Yeah.
And I used to go there as a kid very often. But after I was 17 or 18, maybe I went there like once or twice, and you know, just because I got comfortable and complacent.
Somebody is wanting to know your thoughts on artificial intelligence, since you are you're moving into that field, youth, entertainment.
Yeah. I think it's a very broad question. I will try and answer it in terms of how it's affecting our lives and how it's making things better. Number one, the concept of artificial intelligence, as shown in science fiction movies, is usually very impractical. So I don't think that's how you know. I don't think that's how you should internalize it. I think machine learning and artificial intelligence, these two terms are um, usually taken together. I think it's basically like the next supercomputer. When I was growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, supercomputers was a big deal. Number of calculations a machine can perform per unit of time. I think AI and ML is basically the next version of super smart supercomputers. And the way we apply, for example, at MX, a lot of machine learning is how we curate and customize what content you're most likely to watch and enjoy. We have thousands and thousands of hours of content, and the difference something like AI and ML can make is rather than you having to go search, browse, and choose what you want to watch, you just fed that in a ready-made fashion. So I think it is making our lives better, but I think we're hitting the tip of the iceberg. I can't imagine any business in 5 years or even 10 years from now which will not be run on the basis of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think it's probably true already. Whatever few businesses that have not embraced it, they'll be forced to embrace it or they'll be left obsolete.
When it comes to entertainment, now since you're moving into entertainment, do entertainers also look at what is useful for the society, or do they fundamentally look at what will sell and help to generate a lot of revenue?
I like to think those are not either or. Those are not either or statements. I think in general, like for example, you go back to the 90s, which is when I was growing up. Govinda movies are very popular.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And look, they didn't have, yeah, then they didn't have the social message that an Amir Khan movie in these
Yeah.
days will have. But they were entertaining and they had a purpose in our society because, you could leave your brain at home and you can have, for the 50 or 60 rupees I would spend back in those days on a movie, you would get re-energized. It would be like a stress buster.
Correct.
So I think there's a place and there's a place and spot for every genre, every category of entertainment. And I truly think it's not an either or. I think if businesses like ours start treating it like an either or, that's not sustainable. Something will give up eventually. So look, won't hide the fact that we are a for-profit business, and we run it professionally, and revenue is important. But we are here to entertain the masses. And if you generally think about it, India is such an incredible market. Almost half of our population, somewhere between 500 to 600 million people, a little less than half maybe, have access to mobile internet connectivity. But how many of them have access to true, high quality, professionally created entertainment? The only entertainment we know is linear broadcast television, which we watch at homes. And so whoever controls the remote, like whoever has ownership of the remote control, that's what the entire family is forced to watch. And so entertainment has not been democratized. Entertainment is kind of a fiefdom of the few networks. And no disrespect to Balaji Telefilms or to Ekta Kapoor, and she's I have very high respect for her. She's an incredible businesswoman. But not everyone wants to watch Saas Bahu, dramas, but you're forced to. Like I was forced to watch what my mom wanted to watch, and the amount of fights I've had because I wanted to watch live cricket, and my mom takes control and owns the remote control at 8 p.m. Look, can't argue with that. So what we are trying to do is, 400, 500, 600 million, users in India who have mobile internet connectivity. We're democratizing access to high quality premium entertainment. And a lot of these users don't have the means or the affordability to pay for the Hotstars or the Netflixes or the Amazon Prime videos of the world. So at MX, our mission is to democratize this extremely high quality entertainment at very affordable, in a very affordable way. It's free. You can watch all the content on MX in India for free. But then we also have a business to run. So we will curate and create content that connects with our customers. We understand our customers really well. And, the way we make money is through ads. And, a huge, I want to say, 70, 80, 90% of these 500 million people who have access to mobile internet, they are starved for high quality entertainment. And that's the gap we're trying to fill.
Okay. Wow. So what's the most ambitious goal you have for yourself for the future?
Since I'm in a youth summit, I'll say I think the most ambitious goal I have personally is to grow six-pack abs. Jokes aside, I think my biggest goal, the most ambitious goal I have set for myself, is probably making sure I don't fall trap to complacency again. And kind of learn from some of the hard lessons I've learned. And make sure that I continue taking risks, because I hardly remember a time when I didn't take a risk and it didn't pay off. you know, so I think my biggest ambition right now is to continue knocking on those doors and open many of them, and hope that one of them is going to be bigger and better than I had ever imagined or expected.
Okay. Somebody is asking this question, a naughty question. Which is your favorite OTT platform for binge watching?
Excellent question. I'll answer it with a funny anecdote. When I was growing up, my father and my mother, like my parents, were extremely unhappy and upset about the fact that I would watch an insane amount of TV. I really am not joking. I was addicted. I am addicted. And so my first job at Microsoft was in the media streaming space. And my father, visited the US. He came to my office and he saw like 5 or 6 television screens. There was maybe 10 or 15 Xboxes. Xbox is the gaming console Microsoft builds. My home had 3 televisions. I had a 1-bedroom apartment. I had 3 televisions. One was my own, but another 2 came from office to do some testing at home. And I remember my father literally did this. And he was like, I can't believe that A, you get paid to watch TV because that's what looks like you're doing. And B, you get to wear your chappal and your shorts and your t-shirt, and that's how you come to office. Like, I refuse to believe this. Like I think he was almost like envious of, what I had. I think there was some pride, but I think the envy kind of took over, at least in that moment. So going back to the question, I watch everything. I watch everything from Arya on Hotstar to House of Cards on Netflix to Ashram on MX. If I had to pick one, I think I spend more time on MX now because I'm trying to catch up on all the content that they have. Because I got introduced to MX fairly recently. And so that's the politically right answer because who knows, my boss might watch this at some point of time. But I think as an Indian consumer, I think Prime Video is doing quite well. I think they're doing good content, which is just curated for the Indian customers. I think as a global audience, I feel the quality of content on Netflix is probably unmatched. And then lastly, from I'm a geek. I work in a tech industry. I think from a user experience and technology point of view, Netflix is really good.
Really good. Is there anything you would like to ask us?
I would love to know, there was an interesting conversation we always have at my work right now about, there's India and then there's Bharat. And there are like these 2 countries within one country, which is fascinating. And I would love to get a perspective on, what's the line of sight where these divisions merge into each other. Just as, like experts and, people like yourself, Naren, and the young audience, whether they also believe there is a Bharat and an India, and when do they expect it to converge? I have my opinion on it, but I would love to get a broader point of view as someone who's not lived in India for the last 15 years.
Okay. So I'll tell you what, according to me, is one extraordinary big difference between Bharat and India. In Bharat, there is a lot of drive, hunger, and aspirations on which people are willing to work. In India, there is that complacency and the comfort that you're speaking about. Therefore, Bharat does not take things for granted. There is no sense of entitlement there. They understand efforts are required. India, on the other hand, there is a tremendous sense of entitlement. It can be something as sad as no parking है लेकिन उसी के नीचे गाड़ी खड़ा दो, तुमको मालूम है क्या मैं कौन हूं? Or children telling their parents, if you have taken care of us, what's the big deal? Every parent does that. Or doing nothing for the country, but sitting in the chair and commenting about everything which is going wrong and complaining about what is not okay. Bharat largely minds its own business. For them, there is no Valentine's Day, no Father's Day, no Mother's Day. It is probably the farmer working in the field 365 days a year. It is not yet in the Western culture of weekends or holidays, etc., etc. What will make these merge? What demonetization did for digital wallets, I think this Corona times has done for EdTech. Zoom being a prime example, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, and you listen to a child in 9th and 10th, you listen to a driver, you talk to a Kambali Bai. Everybody now knows Zoom, Microsoft Teams. Now they know, bacha mera padh raha hai. So there is a democratization which is happening, and I think, to use your word, we have just hit the tip of the iceberg when it comes to EdTech. We are still have a long way to go, but I think some good minds are working on how do we bring education to the masses. So what would earlier be in the IITs and let's say St. Xavier's, Calcutta, where you learn English, now these things will be available through a smartphone of 3,000 and thanks to Jio, Reliance and 5,000 rupees handphones. The day education gets democratized and then the gig economy takes over, and in 2008 recession, the world realized that nobody is creating jobs for us. So there is a bend towards becoming an entrepreneur or a service provider by ourselves. You know, these shifts have happened in our country. 2008, then then demonetization, and now this thing called COVID. It has changed things dramatically.
Right.
So the moment this education thing happens, it's going to bring about a new wave. Then, and that is where my expertise and my work and my expression of life is, when we understand the need to train ourselves in life skills, and when we don't say, I will manage my life through my own ways, only for a classic academic education do I need support. So riding on EdTech, when there is an awareness about, let me go to a mentor and talk about how do I live my life. When this openness happens, you will find Bharat and India merging into one faster than anybody in the world imagines.
Very insightful. Very insightful. That makes total sense. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, pleasure. So Sid, thanks so much for coming. Before we realize, I think we have just ran out of time. I have gleaned a few very interesting things from our conversation. One, that you said everything that we do is all about opening doors. Two, when you said life averages things out, sometimes we put huge effort and the speed is slow. Sometimes the effort is low, but the speed may be too high. But mota moti overall, on an average, life averages things out. Then when you also said that every job is actually preparing you for the next job. So how do I look at that work of mine, or how do I look at that opportunity of mine, is so critical. Like, this is High Performance Youth Summit 1, 2020, first time we are having it. This is leading to the next one, which will happen, let's say, next year in December.
Yeah, true.
Then when I asked you about obstacles, you didn't speak about money, you didn't speak about pressure, you didn't speak about expectations, you didn't speak about somebody else setting some very high standards for you. You didn't speak about poverty, mindset. You just said complacency and comfort have been the biggest obstacles that I had to overcome. Now that is very insightful, because mostly when we talk about obstacles, everybody speaks about obstacle in the world outside. My obstacle is my internet nahi chalta hai. Obstacle is my Indian education system is not good. Obstacle is politics is not right. But you so beautifully took it inwards and said the obstacles are complacency and comfort. I think that was a very, very, very beautiful thing to do. And especially when you said it is difficult for us to recognize it ourselves. And we need somebody from the world outside to point it out. And that is why those who are wise about life, and if we are blessed, our parents are wise about life, an elder sister may be wise about life, a friend might be wise about life. And like your spouse and my spouse will say, the spouse is wise about life.
Always.
One of my friends said that I don't need a coach, I am married. No, so
That's bad for your business, Naren, by the way.
yeah, I know. So that's why I'm now coming to the youth summit, na? Because वो तो सब married हो गया तो फिर वहाँ मेरा scope कम हो गया.
Yeah.
So all these things were so beautiful, so useful, and I'm sure all the youth here on various platforms who are listening would have grown so much out of it. So Siddharth, thanks a ton for coming, and looking forward to more chats with you one-on-one. And whenever get a chance, we'll come together on a platform.
Absolutely. Thanks, Naren, and thanks everyone for giving me this opportunity. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This was great.
Thanks, darling. Chalo, see you,
Okay.
bye, and see you soon. One big hug to you.
Thank you. You too.
Chalo, thanks. Bye, thanks.